Hey there, it's Hannah. Today I wanted to talk about the basic premise of my talk is that only men can regulate other men, and that women can't regulate men, nor should we. That's not our role. And that women can negotiate our proximity to men as a result of how well they're regulating themselves under stress, how well or how poorly. That's the premise, okay? So, I think this is important. I've done a lot of talking about Bitcoin and different things, and we're all in the thrall of this economy and what's happening with the fiat DK, but we're also all dealing with each other. Um, this is something that I've learned. I've really been exposed to a lot of how men handle stress and how well they self-regulate or don't in the trades. And in the trades, men self-regulate very, very highly, which is something that I admire about the trades. I have a lot of perspectives on that. So let me start with one quick anecdote, and then there's another one I want to share too. So I have a very self-regulating brother, emotionally self-regulating. He is extremely problem-solving oriented, and is very, very even keel. Interestingly enough, when he was young, he wasn't relative to playing games. He really, really liked to play games, and so did my dad. Cribbage, card games, any kind of board games, anything. And it makes sense because my brother is now a professional game developer and like makes games that thousands of people play. So that kind of checks out. Um, he's interesting in that he will really like play very aggressively and sometimes like fail like dramatically when he's first learning a game, because he's learned how to get himself from point A to point Z to sort of like mastery of any kind of game, like video games. Like he figures out the sort of strategy of it and like what are the left and right margins really, really quickly, as a result of his interest in games. But this started really young. So he wanted to play games with my dad. My dad wanted to play games with him. I didn't really want to. I want to play with stuffed animals, whatever. So my brother, like all males, men and boys, males have very, very strong energy that's outward facing. So it's super strong and it's super like outward facing. Like male energy wants to like grapple with the world. And so my brother, this is when he was very young, he was an extremely sore loser and would essentially like throw temper tantrums and just like lose his fucking mind when he didn't win the game. And then my dad was in a position to kind of like regulate this, which he did. My dad really showed up for this. And one point of this anecdote is that I think when men reach adulthood, or whatever we're calling adulthood now, and they are not able to self-regulate, I think that somebody already kind of like didn't do their job, and by someone I mean their dad, like earlier on, because this thing kind of gets going early for males. And so lots of boys grow up, without dads, or the dad is too tired from all his jobs he's doing, or he just like does the tough love thing. When I hear the term tough love, like it makes me cringe, because that's just kind of like a euphemism for abuse in many cases. Like I get it, but what the role of the father is to do is to sort of take this extremely strong, extremely outward facing male energy on the part of the son, and to channel it, to give it a direction to go. That direction, no. This direction, no. This is the direction you're going to go with that. So it's sort of metaphorically like creating like a room, and you can't make the child like leave that room through the door that's offered before he's ready. It's kind of like you can bang your brains out in this room as long as you want. But if you want to move forward, then here's the door. Energetically, like, here's the door. And so the way that my dad did that for my brother was to be like, I'm not going to play games with you if you're going to be a sore loser and throw a tantrum. I'm going to be your biggest fan when you win fair and square. And winning fair and square against an older, savvier, smarter adult takes a learning curve, and you're going to have to, if you want to get out of this room and if you want to stop banging your brains out and I'm not going to play games with you in here, then you're just going to have to negotiate that learning curve. Like, that's the only thing. That's the shortest distance between, A to Z here, is you negotiating that. And, long story short, ended up really cultivating sportsmanship in my brother. Also, this translated into all kinds of other ways where he learned from this experience very early on to be a very self-regulating male, but still with this appetite, still with this outward facing appetite. So fast forward, I work in the trades. I'm in aviation fueling. Okay. So like, here's just a situation that is totally common that I want you to consider. There's a helicopter that's down. It's down for repairs. All right. It's autumn. It's, let's say, Oregon. The repairs end up being more than what anybody bargained for. Helicopters break like it's their full-time job. Okay, so you got helicopter mechanics, and a lot of the guys that I work with are helicopter mechanics, who I personally am just so impressed by. Like, what an incredible breed of men. Really just like superheroes in terms of the trades. And, the repairs probably should have been done in like a controlled hangar environment and not out in the field, but that was somebody's call maybe 3 or 4 months ago, because the parts that were involved still had some lifespan on them, and the parts are crazy expensive. So it's too expensive to be switching things out before their lifespan has elapsed, So anyway, whatever calls were made, right or wrong, here we are. There's a helicopter. It's down. This is costing the company, could be $20,000, $30,000 per day that the helicopter is down. Could be even more than that, depending on what kind of job it's on. All right. Then you've got the wages of the crew that are significant, and the billeting for the crew, which is significant. Every day that the helicopter is down, there's that $30,000 plus dollars, plus all the wages, plus all the billeting. Okay. Plus all the per diem, plus a part that's probably been expedited to get to the helicopter, several parts maybe, that could be easily like $50,000 or something because of the price tag on all this stuff. And then you've got the weather setting in, and so you've got these guys who they can't just get off work. Okay, they're like working on this until the helicopter can fly again. That's it. And it might take 24 hours. It might take 36 hours. It just takes however long it takes, because once they get the other stuff pulled out, and then now they're getting snowed on and they're getting rained on and they're working in the dark with headlamps under super suboptimal conditions, and they're very physically uncomfortable. They're freezing. They're starving. They can like duck out and get some food, but it's not done till it's done. And then you get in there, and then there's like unexpected. Anybody who's done any kind of mechanicking knows that like once you get something apart, then you're like, oh fuck, like it turns out it's worse than I thought, or whatever, right? It's like Murphy's Law. So this would be like a super common, typical situation, and that I'm not asking you to consider the mechanics of helicopters here. Like, what I'm asking you to consider is the circumstances of the men who are doing this job relative to their stress levels, and how relative to how they're regulating their stress levels. So what I love and appreciate about the blue collar environment is that, what you're not going to see is you're hardly ever going to see this, especially at like a high sort of echelon of professionals of any trade, is men starting to throw tools, men starting to become just generally like pissy and grouchy and like downward spiraling and flaming out and like snapping at the other crew members, like snapping at their coworkers, starting to get like tunnel vision, starting to just like deteriorate, whereas I think that men who, due to like the dad not doing his job or not functioning in an environment like the trades, I'm not saying that's the only one, where males are in this position to be kind of like shamed into like acting right, because that's really what happens. Like there tends to be, and this is a very natural, normal thing, but like it seems kind of counterintuitive for people that haven't worked in these environments. is there tends to be a lot of just joking around, like making fun of stuff, like humor is a big part of it. But if there were to be a male in this situation and he started doing the flame out thing and he started throwing tools and he started getting snappy with other people, that would be like the other guys would be like nipping at his heels, you know. And the way that it would happen first would be through kind of shaming, you know. They'd be like, oh yeah, I remember my first day on the job too, it was pretty stressful, it was pretty brutal, you know. And for men, like that would put him in his place. Like he would get that. Like, men are hierarchical in the way that they receive information and like who it is they're willing to be regulated by. And it's so deep. It's some parts of that are conscious, but I think a lot of that is actually unconscious. It's just like their operating system. They're hierarchical, you know. So, and men are very like driven to like rise hierarchically. Like, you don't want to be the, what is it called, the omega male. Like that's not a good place to be, you know. So for men to regulate on other men in this environment, it can happen in kind of a soft way at first. Like, I don't know if you'd call it soft, like shaming, but I mean, it really will take the form of shaming, and that will like bring that guy in. But if he kind of continues to be that way, nobody will want to work around him, and he's gonna tank at the job, and he's gonna like wash out of that employer or that field, and he's not gonna do well. He's not gonna rise in the ranks. Like, nobody's gonna respect him. You know, it's a stressful situation for everybody, but nobody's gonna respect a man that acts that way, you know, like under stress. So the hierarchy for men includes the way that they show up under stressful conditions. And men are proud of the way that they can, like, that's a big deal. That's a really big deal in the way that men view other men in this hierarchy. You know what I'm saying? So I have messed this up in relationships many times, and I don't see myself messing it up again in the future because I've like learned this lesson so hard. But often what happens is that the man in question, who might be kind of deteriorating and getting like really grouchy and really snappy in the stressful situation, he's not working with other dudes on the top of a helicopter in Oregon. He might be like, you might be like embedded with this guy like as a woman. So I'm kind of making this video for men, but I'm kind of making it for women too. And we show up for each other's stress as women in like an entirely different way that is appropriate for us. We don't, when we're feeling vulnerable and stressed, like we don't like shame each other. That's not like, we don't respond well to that, you know. That's not what we do with each other. And so when we're, as often happens, you know, we're like kind of embedded in a situation with a man where he's like, you know what I'm talking about? He's just like getting that tunnel vision. He's getting pissier and pissier. We try to show up for him the same way that we would show up for another woman. And that might look like, oh, poor thing, like nurturing, like some kind of energy like that, or like it's gonna be okay, like soothing kind of like language, or like maybe try this or maybe try that, you know, kind of like with your energy, like with your, you know, your mood. Like your mood is really like taking a left turn here. Okay. And you know, or even like we'll try like a little bit of tough love with them, like, look, you just got to pull your shit together, bro. And so I think it can't be overstated that we like they're not going to be regulated by us. And that's not like a like, I know it can seem really misogynistic, and in some cases maybe it is, you know. I mean, I was married back in the day for about 3.5 years, and I you know, like my ex-husband had a particular situation in his life that was like, the solution to that was obvious to me, and I kept telling him the solution to that, and he was like, no, that's not it. Essentially, he was too busy at work and never had any time off, and he was exhausted, and he worked for himself, so I was like, you got to raise your rates. And he was like, no, that's not going to work. And then he was busy, exhausted, angry, bitchy, a lot of this, what this gets into is like we're not actually, I mean, we're like offering, as women, we're like offering solutions to our man, because we want to like materially help his situation, but also we're like, I would like you to stop being that way so that I can stop reacting to the stress of you being that way. Like, once you get into that, right? So, yeah, numerous times I was like, you need to raise your rates. You need to raise your rates. He was like, no, 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 that's not it. So then a colleague of his, which in the hierarchical organization of his brain, he considered this guy was a little bit more well established, right? Was like, oh, dude, it's easy. You just need to raise your rates. And so he raised his rates, and then like the whole problem solved itself. And like then he had the equal amount of income, but like some free time, and his schedule opened up and stuff like that. And I remember, I mean, this was years ago, but I was like, right, like I think I must have said that at least 6 times. I got fucked off on that, but this is just sad but true, or hard but true, or it's not even necessarily sad. It's just like I had to kind of like learn more about men and women in the world to realize that like he's not going to take input from me about work. There's a lot of things that men, they're just not going to take input from women. They're not, and so there's a lot of men out there that are loose cannons, and there's a lot of women out there that are trying to like give them input about that. And that's just not, I know it seems like so simple, like that's the right, like I was like, raise your rates, and like that should have just been it. But it's actually like really fascinating to kind of watch these dynamics play out. It's more fascinating when I'm not personally involved. Like then it's interesting. When I'm involved, I don't like it. But like I said, I feel probably less likely to mess this kind of thing up now. Yeah, they're not going to take input from us. Like literally our input that they're going to take into account is our proximity to them, So he's being a loose cannon. I'm going to move myself further back. I'm going to, like literally, figuratively, like whatever way that I can do that. This is what gets hard about relationships and about the fucking economy, is that we're like, our legs are taped together, right? As like husbands and wives and men and women in this like 3-legged race, because we can't afford to like live without the other one. Like we just need them to like show up, and so we get into these like power dynamics. Like if everyone just, had the ability to be like entirely sovereign and we're just choosing to be together, then, we're like, oh, he's in a thing. He's downward spiraling. He's honestly starting to become kind of a loose cannon. I understand, and it's not anything against me. It's not anything against women. He's not going to take input from me. He's not going to be regulated by me. I'm just going to distance myself. And when he like fucking wakes up and notices that, he's going to have to problem solve and do some outward oriented masculine energy kinds of things to close that distance again with me. And that's just what he's going to have to do. And if he's doing a great job of self-regulating, even under stress, and he's not being a loose cannon, and he's keeping even keel, and he's staying in a problem-solving mentality, and he's creating a set of circumstances where I feel like super comfortable with his leadership and like how he's going to handle stress, because stress just comes. Like you don't get a choice about that. Everybody has stress, but I'm like very confident in his leadership, like steering us through the stress. Then I'm going to want to get closer and closer and like intertwine my life with his more and more, so it'd be amazing if we just all had the freedom to do that without thinking about the childcare, the bills, the mortgage, the like whatever, all the things. But that's where we are in this delicious life experience of high contrast, where we get to fuck around and find out, learn all these things, but yeah, men aren't going to take input from women, and they're not going to take regulation from women. And a healthy male is not going to answer to a woman. I'm sorry, that probably sounds like a really controversial thing to say. A healthy male is not going to answer to a woman. He is going to he's going to like act on his own values in such a way that she is going to be confident in his leadership and like pulled into a state of wanting to be in closer proximity with him. He's not taking his women, we have really strong energy too that is largely like inward oriented. That's why the kind of archetypes of like women is like mystics and sort of like the intuitive the emotional, spiritual, like intuitive leaders of a relationship, like that's our strong suit, you know? To the extent that we fail to develop those characteristics and we get co-opted by the feminist narrative or whatever, and we think that we need to be like out there being men, you know, we're not doing the thing that we're so naturally gifted at, and we're doing the thing that just like physically and hormonally we're never going to be as good at. And I know that might sound kind of crazy from a woman who like works in the trades, but like that's, you know, that's like that's why I can say this so confidently. You know, yeah, they weren't hiring for like random feminine mystic. Like I had to like go get a job, you know. So I'm very happy with my work, but I really like observing these kinds of things. So obviously a healthy male is able to function in an environment where his direct supervisor, or you know, somewhere in his chain of command is a female, and he's like, that's, you know, like a healthy male isn't going to have any issues with that kind of thing. But it's true that men consider women to be not in their chain of command. It's not that when I say they're hierarchical and they don't take our input, what I'm not saying is that in the hierarchy we're below them and that's why they're not taking our input. Like they just consider us to be not in their chain of command. Their chain of command is men. And whether they're conscious of this or unconscious of it, that's actually the way that they function. And so it's only the other males that they consider to be in their chain of command who are going to be in a position to regulate them. And it's actually like this system works fine. It's just in many ways, like in our modern society, we've kind of like pitted ourselves against it. There's nothing, it's actually like really beautiful, you know? But for any woman, I've definitely been like in the trenches with a male who's become a loose cannon. And I'm sort of like lobbing things his way. I'm like, fucking try some breath work, like maybe meditate. You know, these are things I would tell another woman. And I'm kind of like, why don't you get that like your volatility is like the thing that keeps making everything worse. And like until you get a handle on your volatility, everything is going to keep getting worse for both of us. You know, there could be a sense of desperation of like, get your shit together. You know what I mean? But I'm not in his chain of command. The only thing that I can do that is going to register on his radar, and it will, this is the only thing I have to do as a woman. This is how powerful we are, is to just negotiate my proximity to him. And if he's botching it with his energy and his ability to self-regulate, I just got to move further away. No comment, you know, I'm just, my proximity is the comment. That's it. So, that is what I have learned about men and women from working in the trades. Any comments you have, any insight you have, I appreciate. I hope you enjoyed.